But perhaps the greatest breakthrough of all, Madam Speaker, was the discovery of a process that turns everyday, ordinary skin cells into pluripotent, embryo-like stem cells. On November 20th, 2007, Japanese scientist Shinya Yamanaka and Wisconsin researcher James Thompson shocked the scientific community by independently announcing their ability to derive pluripotent stem cells through the reprogramming of regular skin cells. Regular skin cells turned into pluripotent stem cells. iPS cells, as they're called, are made by adding a small number of factors or genes to regular skin cells in a petri dish that can remodel mature cells into stem cells that are functionally identical to those obtained from embryos. In other words, Madam Speaker, scientists have found a way of transforming your cells, skin cells, and mine into stem cells called induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPS. Pluripotent stem cells are those miraculous building block cells that could be coaxed into becoming any type of tissue found in the human body. Unlike embryonic stem cells that kill the donor, are highly unstable, have a propensity to morph into tumors, and are likely to be rejected by the patient unless strong anti-rejection medicines are administered, induced pluripotent cells, stem cells, have none of those deficiencies and are emerging as the future, the greatest hope of regenerative medicine. While some members of Congress and President Obama still don't get it, the breakthroughs have not been lost on the mainstream press. For example, on November 21st, Reuters reported, and I quote, "Two separate teams of researchers announced on Tuesday that they have transformed ordinary skin cells into batches of cells that look and act like embryonic stem cells, but without using cloning technology and without making embryos." The New York Times reported on the same day. Two teams of scientists reported that they have turned human skin cells into what appears to be embryonic stem cells without having to make or destroy an embryo, a feat that could quell the ethical debate troubling the field. The Associated Press said, "Scientists have created the equivalent of embryonic stem cells from ordinary skin cells, a breakthrough that could someday produce new treatment for diseases without the explosive moral questions of embryo cloning." Even University of Wisconsin, Dr. James Thompson, the man who first cultured human embryonic stem cells, told the New York Times, "Now with the new technique, which involves adding just 4 genes to ordinary skin cells, it will not be long before the stem cell wars are a distant memory. A decade from now," he went on, "this will be a funny historical footnote." Dr. Thompson told the Detroit Free Press, "While ducking the ethical debate wasn't the goal, it is probably the beginning of the end of the controversy over embryonic stem cells." In Medical News Today, Dr. Thompson went on to say, speaking about this latest breakthrough, "The induced cells do all the things embryonic cells do. It's going to completely change the field." The other advantage, he went on, of the new method is the fact that using cells drawn from the patient's own skin, the stem cells can be customized to the patient, bringing numerous benefits, such as the elimination of immune system rejection. They are probably more clinically relevant than embryonic stem cells. Madam Speaker, this past Monday, more good news. No, let's call it great news on the iPS front. Research teams from the United Kingdom and Canada published 2 papers in the prestigious scientific journal Nature, announcing that they had successfully reprogrammed ordinary skin cells into induced pluripotent stem cells without the use of viruses to transmit the reprogramming genes to the cell. Using a piggyback system, as they called it, the scientists were able to insert DNA where they could alter the genetic makeup of the regular cell before being harmlessly removed. According to many scientists, the removal of potentially cancer-causing viruses means this breakthrough increases the likelihood that iPS cells will be safe for clinical use in human patients. The lead scientist from Canada, Andras Nagy, was quoted in the Washington Post saying, "It's a leap forward in the safe application of these cells. We expect this to have a massive impact on this field." And George Daly at Children's Hospital in Boston said, "It's very significant. I think it's a major step forward in realizing the value of these cells for medical research." This breakthrough, Madam Speaker, suggests the momentum has decisively and irrevocably swung to non-controversial stem cell research like iPS cells and away from embryo-destroying research. The lead scientist from the UK was quoted in the BBC saying, "It's a step towards the practical use of reprogrammed cells in medicine, perhaps even eliminating the need for human embryos as a source of stem cells." Finally, in the Washington Post, Dr. Nagy made a series of interesting comments this week. First, that his studies showed that iPS cells had many of the properties of embryonic stem cells. Second, while the research in this particular case was done on fetal cells, the approach should work equally well with adult stem cells. And third, since iPS cell research should no longer require the specialization of virus labs and researchers, the number of researchers working on iPS cells is expected to increase again beyond the large number already devoting their attention to induced pluripotent cells since November of 2007. There has been an explosion in this area because this holds the greatest promise. Time magazine reporting on the efficacy and the advantage of iPS stem cells says, "The iPS technology is the ultimate manufacturing process for cells. It is now possible for researchers to churn out unlimited quantities of patient stem cells, which can be then turned into any of the cells of the body that the body might need to repair or replace." Despite all of this, Madam Speaker, this new and extraordinary progress in the iPS and adult stem cell research arena, the Obama administration and the House and Senate Democratic leadership remain obsessed with killing human embryos for experimentation at taxpayer expense. Why persist in the dehumanizing of nascent human life when better alternatives exist, alternatives that work? On both ethics grounds and efficacy grounds, non-embryonic stem cell research is the present and it is the future of regenerative medicine and the only responsible way forward.